There is some absolute market madness going on right now. It's Friday, August 2nd. It is 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I want to quickly make note of the data that came out this morning on US economy. So what are we looking at? Jobs report, very weak. Unemployment hits nearly 3-year high. Um, really not good. And as a result of this data, we look at the dollar, and the dollar actually catching a little bit of a rebound, but dollar was crushed about 1.5% today. And I want to make note of a couple of things here. So one, actually really interesting that silver is going back to neutral where it was down about 1.5% earlier today. We saw gold hit another record high, but then it failed. So gold being the safe haven when we have weak economic data and more interest rate cuts potentially being on the table, Fed's talking about cutting in September. We actually are seeing now that gold is failing off that news. So you have to think all these assets trade in US dollars. So when the dollar is weaker, these assets should be way up. So at least, 1.1% gold should be higher just based on the change in the dollar alone. And gold's actually down right now. So hit an all-time high and then failed. What does that tell us? So that tells us there's a news failure. So gold on that economic data, that really weak and bad economic data, plus the dollar getting crushed, gold should be way up right now and maintaining those new highs, and it's not. It's actually been rejected. And part of the reason of this happening is the amount of speculators that are already stacked in on gold. So if we go back here, and we're about to get a new commitment of traders report today that will show the new setup for where speculators and commercials are set up for gold, but gold very stacked on the long side for speculators and commercials are shorting it. So it's no wonder that this thing came off the top. So we've actually entered a short position. It seems really counterintuitive to short gold when there's weak economic data, there's potentially more rate cuts coming, but this news failure makes it seem like gold is going to be getting a correction here. So we're in on a short at 24.78. It's about 2/3 of a position size right now, so not a full position. We recently shorted gold and we had lost on that position. Gold took off, we got stopped out. That's what it is. But I think there's a lot of opportunity here for gold to continue to sell off based on this news failure. So we're going to see there. And we're also trying to catch this palladium long if this gets down a little bit lower to about 870. I like palladium at these price levels. It bottom wick down at 868 and then ripped back up to about 930 the other day. Now we're looking if we can retest 870, this Fibonacci retracement. We'll jump in on a long position here. And that'll also somewhat hedge against the short on gold, but we'll see where that goes. Yeah, just absolute market madness. I mean, the market has been tanking the past couple of days. Oil has been all over the place. I mean, oil had this rocket up on geopolitical tensions and then just ripped right back to the downside here. And we might look, depending on the positioning that we get in the commitment of traders today, seeing how the speculators are stacked up versus the commercials. We might look to get long here, but I think right now it's just very stacked on the short side. And this was just a mistrade a couple weeks back. We missed the trade to short gold or short oil, excuse me. Other things that we're looking at, I think gasoline futures is interesting if we can find a reversal on the bottom here. And we had a nice reversal on that economic data the other day, but now it's selling right back off here. So we're going to look to find a reversal here. And if anything in the energies, we're going to go long on gasoline. Nat gas getting crushed still. Bitcoin has been chopping and looking like it's going lower. I would like to catch a gap fill here. If we can get to about $58,000, I'd probably go long. Still very much long on Bitcoin. Other positions that we've taken or are in, let's just take a quick look here. Um, Currencies, we get stopped out on Canadian dollar for a small loss. It was only half a position size. We're looking to find a bottom and reversal here. Canadian dollar should be a lot stronger today with the dollar being that much weaker, but it's really not going anywhere. It's almost neutral on the day. So nothing there, no entry yet. British pound, this thing fell off a cliff yesterday, and now it's just catching a little bit of a recovery here. I mean, look at this massive red candle on the daily. This was such a great short as well, and now it's just catching a little bit of a V recovery, but then getting rejected. So we're going to have to see if this thing continues down. It's very stacked on the long side, so I think we're continuing down on the British pound. And same thing with Australian dollar. I mean, this thing looks like it's trying to catch a bottom, but if you look on the daily, I mean, this thing's just not, it's not looking too good here. I mean, it's just ripping to lower lows. So we're in on a short on Australian dollar and British pound, and both of those doing very well. Canadian dollar stopped out of. And the Swiss, we are in on a position there, and we are up 1.4% today. I mean, this thing breaking out nicely, and I think we're heading back up to new highs here. Great breakout, great chart here to be on the long side. And this Swiss is just a safe haven currency, so people will go into the Swiss whenever there's a lot of economic turmoil, especially in the U.S. market, and that's exactly what we're seeing. And the yen, I mean, is this an indication of the swap that we were talking about? Is this an indication of the carry trade, right? I mean, there was a discussion of what was called the carry trade with the yen. um, this guy, I don't really know this guy too much. I think he's one of these like ultra bears where, the economy, I think he's predicted the past, 20, he's predicted 20 recessions, and he's been right 20 times out of the past two, right? I mean, everything is always a recession, I think, to this guy. But could he be right here on the carry trade? We talked about this on a couple earlier reports where the yen has been so cheap, and interest rates being near zero, or I think negative at one point. You could borrow money from Japan and you could go invest it somewhere else. And that has been happening for a lot of major world economies and other countries. They're borrowing money from Japan, they're investing it elsewhere. And what happens when the yen starts to get squeezed and goes to the upside? The yen here going up and up, well, that means that we have to um, have a higher margin in order to have that money we borrowed against the yen. If the yen is now more expensive, we have to have a higher margin. So what happens? Well, people pull out of equities in order to cover that margin that's going up on the yen. So look, I mean, just look at the S&P, it's crushed. The Nasdaq is crushed. The Russell is crushed. Down 4% yesterday, down 3.5 today. The Dow is crushed. I mean, these are really, really bad looking charts. And look at the yen. I mean, the yen is just ripping higher. Man, I think there's something here. Look at this thing. I mean, if this gets short squeezed and actually goes parabolic to the upside, I don't, I don't want to know what the Dow, the S&P, and the Nasdaq are going to look like on those charts. So yeah, we're gonna hide and watch. I think for now, we tried to do a Russell trade to go on the long side here. We got stopped out, and then it just ripped to the bottom. So really, just saved us there because this thing doesn't look like it's catching a slowdown. Could we catch a bottom and a reversal? Sure. It's really a coin flip at this point, whether we're staying in this bull market or whether we're going to just continue to sell off. So I think best to stay out of trading equities for the time being and stay in kind of those risk off assets such as gold, if you can catch a dip on gold where it's not heavily stacked. But the Swiss, I think, is going to be really important to be in a position on, or shorting, right? I think shorting some of these other currencies can be really good because the dollar likely will show strength, or at least more strength than these other currencies. So yeah, I think this is really a sign for concern if you ask me with the yen. If this carry trade is actually something that's going to go in effect, and if you look at the daily, right, I mean this isn't anything to be concerned about just yet with the yen. I mean the yen is still down pretty good couple percent on the year. If we look at a multi-year chart, I mean the yen is just still very much down. So is this carry trade occurring? Probably not. But if this does get squeezed up because the yen was so short and so many people, so many currency or countries have been borrowing against the yen, in order to invest in equities. I mean, if this gets short squeezed and people get margin called and they have to load up because the yen's now more expensive and we borrowed too much from Japan, I think equities are going to tumble if that scenario does play out. And, we haven't seen anything yet if that's the case. I mean, this is such a minor pullback on the daily charts right now. This is really not, I mean, we're erasing what, 15 days of, upward movement here potentially. We haven't seen anything yet if this carry trade does take effect. So who knows? I mean, is that what's playing out? Maybe, maybe not. I don't think we're there yet, but I do think it's a cause of concern if we continue to see the yen rip up. So, just my thoughts. We are in on shorting Australian dollar, British pound. We're long on the Swiss, and we are currently shorting gold, which is now turning into some decent profit if we continue to see that news failure go in the right direction. So that's the positions we're in on. We're going to probably stay away from equities for a while, and we're going to try to get in on palladium. And other things we see is cotton being set up, but we need a reversal news failure here. Cotton not really doing a lot, but chopping sideways. Oats is set up, and we're going to have new data today when the commitment of traders comes out that shows the positioning for commercials versus speculators. So we're going to know these opportunities are probably going to change pretty substantially, but oats is still looking good as of last week's report. Unleaded gas, which is here, we're trying to find a reversal, which I actually like how this is getting cheaper and cheaper. If it could go lower, if it's this shorted, it could be really interesting. And then for tradable interest, palladium, like we talked about, sugar, we got stopped out on at break even for our last position. So we moved our stop. We got stopped out here at $18. We took our profit on the other position, made about $1,000 profit there. And then crude oil, just we're not getting that position, so we're going to get rid of that one. So that's what we're looking at, and we'll talk again on either Sunday for the setups or early next week. Thanks.